if you remember one of these bad boys. It's about time for an update. Say hello to the brand new Amaran P60c and P60x. If you've been shooting video in the mid-2010s or know what a 5D Mark III is, you would probably remember Aputure as that brand who made these affordable Amaran LED panels. Well, look where that's taken them. They've gone a pretty long way since then, which is why, as a user of their lines, I find it somewhat comforting to see that Aputure is revisiting their roots, these low-cost Amaran panels, and it's quite the refresh. You can see they've taken what they've picked up over the years, making all those high-end fixtures, and bringing it back to these accessible Amaran panels. This round there's the P60c, which is a full-color RGBWW panel, and the P60x, which is bicolor. Now on paper, it might sound like the C is just an RGB version of the X, or so I thought as well. I now actually feel the 60C to be almost a completely different light from the X. The C is more like a baby version of the Nova series. But let's start on some common ground. Both the lights can be powered off the included AC adapter or using two NP batteries. They will not work with just one, but they've also brought along one of the best features of the old Amaran panels. The light functions as a charger for the NP batteries when you have it hooked up to AC. They both come with a soft case, but this time around the P60s also ship with a softbox and honeycomb grid included. The softbox folds down into a tiny footprint, and when you open it up, it uses these collapsible spacer rods to prop itself outwards. It's a completely toolless setup, and you can mount it onto the light using 4 elastic bands on the back. The lights have 3/4-inch mounting points, and it comes with a light stand adapter that has an umbrella holder built in. Now, one of the biggest updates to these panels is, of course, Sidus Link support. You can control these with the app alongside all your other Aputure lights. And that is sort of where the similarities end for me. You see, if you place these two panels side by side, you would realize that they are not even the same size. We'll start with a closer look at the P60x. This one's going to be a more familiar bicolor LED panel that we're quite used to seeing. There's not really that many ways you can change up a bicolor panel. Most of the time we're concerned about how bright it is, and this one is plenty bright for a 60-watt fixture. Interestingly enough, this light hits its peak brightness not in the middle of the color temperature range, but it's actually brightest at its daylight end of 6500 Kelvin. I'm measuring 4200 lux at 1 meter, a pretty impressive output considering the panel actually has a pretty wide spread. The warmest this light can go is 3200 Kelvin, and at this end it's only about a third stop weaker compared to the daylight end. This gets one fan on the back keeping it cool. There's also an OLED display and 2 dials, one for the intensity and one for the color temperature. You can push in on the dials to fast cycle each parameter to a few predefined values. There's also an effects mode that lets you choose from 4 different lighting effects. And now, let's bring out the P60c. There it is, which in my opinion is a much more exciting panel than the X. From the get-go, you can already see it's got a very different arrangement of LEDs because this is now RGBWW. But what really sold me on the P60c is how it does not have a disadvantage in brightness over the P60x. Generally, we can expect RGB lights to not perform as bright as their bicolor counterparts, especially when drawing the same amount of power. But that's not the case with the P60c. It is physically slightly wider and taller than the X, which allows it to house a lot more individual diodes. For the white diodes only, I'm counting about 3 times more than the P60X, and that's not even including the RGB diodes. So when you operate the P60c in CCT mode, I'm practically getting the same amount of output as I would with the P60X. There is a bit of variance, but within the margin of a third stop, not really a pragmatic difference. The P60c also hits its peak brightness at the cool end of its CCT range, which actually brings up something else. As a bicolor fixture, the C version actually does a better job than the X version because it's got a wider color temperature range. It can hit 2500 Kelvin at the warm end and 7500 Kelvin at the cool end. Not only that, because it's also RGB, the P60c gains the ability to apply a green-magenta tint correction in CCT mode, and speaking of RGB, your primary mode for dialing color in would be the HSI mode, but there is also a gel mode that contains 46 presets. Also, because of its RGB capabilities, the P60c can handle a much wider variety of effects compared to the 4 found on the P60x. Yeah, having RGB is quite an unfair advantage. This is a panel capable of throwing out extremely saturated colors at a very respectable intensity. There are also 3 dials instead of 2 on the back of the P60c, and I do want to say the layout of it is very well thought out. Each parameter displayed is always controlled by the dial in its relative position. It actually works exactly like the interface of the Nova. We even get 4 preset buttons that are absent from the P60x. These are incredibly useful. You simply press and hold a button to assign your current settings onto that preset, and that allows you to recall them instantly with a button press. One other cool thing is the P60c also gets a much larger display than the P60x. It's especially visible when displaying menu text, but you might also notice the P60c gets 1 extra fan compared to the X. It does have a lot more diodes, so I guess having 2 fans makes sense. Thankfully, the fans on both these fixtures are very silent. I would say if you're not close enough to touch the light, you probably won't hear it either. Both the fans on both these lights are on right behind me, and the mic is right up here, so if fan noise was indeed an issue, you would probably have heard it this far into the video. I do appreciate how responsive the dials are on both these lights. They're stepless dials, and I really like how instantaneous and linear the light's response is to the dial inputs. To complement this, both the panels also get very smooth stepless dimming all the way down to 1%. The only thing missing are probably customizable dimming curves. The P60c will be retailing for $329, and the P60x is even more affordable at $239. I'm personally leaning towards the P60c. I think it's definitely worth the $90 extra. The C does, however, weigh a bit more than the X. It does have a bit more stuff crammed in it, but both are nonetheless spectacular panels for the price. I'll put purchase links below for anyone interested, and I will be seeing you in one of my other videos.